basically, they just said, go nuts. And she's like, I'm going to do what I've always wanted to do. I'm going to go crazy. And did that. So that's why it goes like, ba-da, 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 ba-da.
Hello, friends. Welcome to Let's Talk Stories, the podcast where three story-obsessed storytellers unpack the movies, shows, and characters that live rent-free in our heads. It's therapy, but for the stories that made us. And today we have a special guest with us. This is Fred Fitzgerald. He is an anime enthusiast, a podcaster, and an author. We're super excited to have you here to talk about Cowboy Bebop. Do you want to give the listeners a little intro about what you love to do and got you into storytelling?
Ooh, certainly. So, first and foremost, I like to watch anime. I've been doing that for, quite a while now, let's put it that way. As for what got me into storytelling, I guess it was just stuff was being made and I didn't like any of it, so I figured, okay, well, maybe I can't make the next great thing, but I could at least give it a try. And I was listening to another podcast, funnily enough, and the host gave a little bit of advice where he basically said, go to your local Barnes and Noble or, whatever bookstore you have and look around and look at all the books and realize that half of them are probably really, really bad and you could at least do that much. So you might as well go ahead. And I did it and I'm still doing it.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, today we're talking about Cowboy Bebop, which Charles, you have been begging for a long time. I've read an article you wrote about some of your history with this show. Do you want to give the intro to the show?
We're all going to hear me talk about this stupid. One sec. Anime. I have the movie signed by Bo Billingsley and Steve Bloom. So
nice.
I need the last two members of the Bebop. And I have my little plushies in my closet.
Awesome.
I have a problem. But yeah, so we're just gonna jump right into that. So basically, I grew up with anime. I was of the, the British invasion of the 60s. It was like the 90s invasion of anime from Japan, of Pokemon, Card Captors, Dragon Ball, Sailor Moon, all that Toonami good stuff. Kids WB was Pokemon, but whatever. So I knew all that stuff. Was in anime. I remember watching Last Exile on G4. That's kind of might actually date me, to a certain extent. But I remember that this show was something that my dad was really into. And one day I had seen him watching a movie, and I can't remember if the first thing I had seen was the climactic fight or the opening scene. But it was really cool. I really liked it. And I knew the opening. I was like, yeah, that's really cool. Fast forward a few years later, and I'm in 10th grade, and my horrible, evil, hellish high school had this fantastic idea to give a bunch of these trashy, horrible students like me, well, actually it wasn't that bad, but you know what I'm saying, computers, for work. Yeah, work. Okay. And this was the first computer I ever had. I was like, this is amazing. And it was during, I think it was my myth class in 10th grade. I finished up my work and I said, well, I'm going to do what, a freaking otaku nerd like me is going to do. I'm going to watch anime. And, well, I wasn't really an otaku then, but still, whatever. I was into anime, but not like I am now. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to watch Cowboy Bebop. I heard about that. And I see the first shot, the first sounds. And the moment the music started, I just fell in love. Fell in love. I was hooked and I was obsessive. And the thing is, my mom kind of didn't want me to watch this kind of anime because it was violent, right? So it was my little sneaky way of doing it in my teenage rebellious phase there. But what is really important is my freshman year tied into moving to Georgia from Southern California, which I talked about as being this apocalyptic experience. And my freshman year, was horrible. I dreaded going back to high school and dreaded being with everything. I hadn't joined theater yet. I didn't have friends. I didn't have nothing. I had a a few chums, but I hadn't like real friends, just people I hung out with and survival, the prison. And I watched this anime, and it just truly, truly saved my life from either hurting myself or hurting someone else, because it was really that bad. The stuff that was going on in my life at the time and that high school, it was just truly tormenting to me. And it was these characters, Spike and Jet, and Faye and Ed and Ein, and their adventures and their stories that just, it felt like I had friends. It felt like I had this sanctuary to be in, and saved me. So I would, flip on the soundtrack walking from class to class with my headphones. I didn't have to hear people for a few minutes. And if I was upset, I could just go back to these characters, these stories. And like I said, it really did save my life. Like, whew, there is a fair truth to the idea that I may not be here without this anime, because something might have happened to me. And that's really, really special. And I carried that. And it's interesting because of this anime, I became full-fledged otaku. Like manga, animes, watching the yada 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 yada. Like, I liked anime before, of course. I loved it. It was great. But now I was like, one of the ilk, one of us. And it also, because I was listening to Steve Bloom, who voices Spike Spiegel in the English dub, that it brought me to MomoCon, which I've been going to MomoCon since 2013, which was when Steve Bloom was there, and that because I was listening to him being interviewed by Rob Paulson. So that became a thing, and MomoCon has become kind of a second sort of home event for me, where I bought the other otaku stuff you can't see behind the camera. But yeah, I think something really powerful is that when I met Bill Billingsley, I was talking to him about what this anime meant to me, and he had encouraged me and said, "You did it. You beat that time. You're here now," and that really meant a lot. And when I met Steve Bloom, he had and Steve Bloom is like the coolest guy. Bill Billingsley is very cool too. But Steve Bloom told me that he was bullied as a kid, and which part was like, that doesn't make sense. Look at him. How could he be bullied? But I told him my story, and cross my heart, hope to die, hand on the Bible. The thing when I parted from him at this meet and greet was he told me, "Your words are important, man. Keep saying that." And I had that quote over the door of my first job's office, and I still remember that to this day. And part of why I do storytelling stuff is to return that gift that stories like Bebop gave to me. And a huge, huge influence, huge, huge comfort for me. 2 MomoCons ago, there was a Bebop concert, and it was the greatest thing of all time. Coincidentally, that was when, in the MLB season, because this was in Atlanta, that Ronald Acuna Jr. hurt himself. And 2 days later, I went to see the Braves game. I'm like, "Where's Acuna? Where'd he go?" And it was like, well, during the time of the Cowboy Bebop concert, he hurt himself. So it's always kind of tied in my brain because it was in Atlanta at the time. So yeah, I apologize if I completely took over this podcast, but that is...
I didn't want to lead it anyway.
That is my narrative, and anime is brilliant and life-saving, and don't let anyone tell you different. Hi, Jared.
Jared hasn't said anything.
I was letting you guys talk. I wanted you guys to talk. Listen, I am new to the whole world of anime in general. For me, I had heard about Cowboy Bebop when I was in high school. I think it was middle school too, like late middle school, like towards like the 8th grade. I had heard about it, but I was like completely opposed to anime at the time, just because there was this general association with the anime with where I had come from that was like, that's not for you. That's for the other kids. You don't get to, if you want to be this, you can't like that. And I was like, okay, cool, I'm not going to do that. And then I went to a psych hospital, and the first anime I was ever introduced to, like to actually watch, was Outlaw Star. And I really, really, really liked that. I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is cool. And I spent an ungodly amount of time watching that in the hospital. It helped me get through that period of time. So I can relate to that. I did not see Cowboy Bebop until long after that. and I only saw like bits and pieces of it. And as I was saying before we started the podcast, the universe does not want me to watch this in its entirety, as it seems to stop me at 6 episodes every single time. And I don't know why. I don't know why it happens. But the 6 episodes that I have seen of it, I have thoroughly enjoyed. At first, it was a little slow, and I was like, okay, I wish this would pick it up. But that's kind of my fault with, that's my thing with anime in general. A lot of times it's really, really slow burn. Like, there's some that have been really, like, when I watched Revengers, I was like, oh no, this is dope. I watched that whole thing in a day, and I was like, this is awesome. Or like Assassin Classroom or whatever the fuck. I enjoyed that. I was like, oh, this is fast paced. I like that kind of stuff. But I was limited to also outside of Outlaw Star, I was also limited to Dragon Ball Z, because that was the only other thing, and maybe a little Pokemon, if you consider that. I don't know if that's considered anime or not, but I imagine so. Okay, yeah. So yeah, a little bit of that, but mostly Dragon Ball Z, because I would watch it on Toonami every afternoon, or before that it used to come on every Friday morning. At like, I want to say like 5 o'clock in the morning. It would come on 5 and 5:30 until right before we went to school. I would watch it, and I would watch it to get amped to go to school, because I also was massively bullied. In elementary school, I was massively bullied. Like, I'm talking about, I used to get peed on type of bullied. It was like bad. And so for me, I would watch fucking Goku power up, and I'd be like, this is how you get pumped so you can go to school and you can fight and you'll be good. I get my ass kicked, but it was totally cool. It was totally cool. I was mentally prepped. That's where my brain has been when it comes to anime. So this whole thing was definitely an adventure. Since we're talking about mostly I'm assuming we're talking about the first 4-ish episodes. I'm imagining Fred and Charles are probably gonna geek out a bit and talk about the entirety of it, and that's totally fine. Me and Jaylon will just come along for the ride.
To get schooled today.
Yeah, so we will sit in the back seat, and you guys can totally have the front seat today. But yeah, what about you, Fred? When did you first come into contact with Cowboy Bebop?
That's a good question. I think I've always kind of been aware of it, just because when I was first introduced to anime and animation in general, it was my dad, because he's a big fan of animation. To sort of tie things into an earlier episode, my first experience with Superman was with the old Fleischer cartoons from the 40s. So that's what I think of first and foremost. Superman beating up those robots that were stealing gems from the jewelry store and stuff like that. But
my guy,
yeah, like I remember, I think I must have been 6 or 7. My dad was watching Princess Mononoke, the Studio Ghibli film, and I sat down and I watched it too. And maybe I shouldn't have at that age, because some bits of it are
yeah.
That is also an article.
Really?
Yeah.
That is also another article that I learned from Charles about a little bit about the significance behind that movie, but never watched it myself.
It's a good one. It's definitely worth a watch. But my dad, like, he enjoys film, he enjoys animation, and because Cowboy Bebop is sort of like this sci-fi neo-noir, like, that was always sort of adjacent to the things my dad liked. So I think, like, maybe he mentioned it at one point offhand or something, but like I always kind of vaguely knew of it. And then when I started getting into anime in general, that was always on the list of like, good English dubs to watch, like first good things to get into, stuff like that. So I think I watched it for the first time, I was probably 13 or so. So old enough to like understand a fair bit of what's going on, but there was also a fair bit of depth that I've grown to appreciate with time as I've gotten older.
I just want to say too, going back a little bit, for the record, for anybody that's watching that happens to be of the Jared skin color persuasion, anime is heavily loved amongst my community at this point in time. Just when I was growing up, it was not. It was the same thing about comic books, which I also loved, but those were just things that were just not for us at the time. Or there might have been a community, but it was one of those things where like you were kind of we were so afraid to admit that it was our thing that like nobody would ever admit it first. So it was like you would go home and you'd have like all of these like collections and things like that, but you would never tell anybody about it. And now it's just kind of cool to say, okay, yeah, I've always loved this stuff. I just didn't know I could say anything. So I just want to say that for the record before like anybody ever just comes out and is like, Black people like anime too. Shut up, So
Well, to be fair, it's kind of a universal thing, just because I remember being picked on for reading Dragon Ball and Bleach,
Yeah,
and,
see,
like,
I get that.
Yeah, like, that's just how it was, and, like, you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who doesn't at least appreciate Dragon Ball these days, I feel like, especially with the passing of Akira Toriyama.
Rest in peace.
Shaylon's like, I hate it. No,
I just need to watch it. I have no exposure to it besides when you guys have referenced it on the show.
But you have watched Bleach, which is.
I have. Okay, my experience with Bleach. This was the first anime I ever actually watched, and my husband specifically showed it to me first because he was like, "This is actually an interesting plot where like it builds on itself, and you don't have kind of thing where you have repetitive episodes where it's just like the bad guy of the week episodes." And that character development, he knows that I appreciate seeing that in stories. So we were driving up to see family for Christmas time, and it was a 14-hour drive. And so for 28 hours, we watched Bleach. And ever since then, I have not been able to watch it again because my brain just tunes out.
Oh, dear. To be fair, I never watched Bleach or watched Dragon Ball. I only ever read the manga.
That's how I know Dragon Ball best too. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, I mean, because like it's a bit of a meme, like 5 minutes until Namek explodes, but it's 13 episodes, so like the pacing might not be great, but
except for I know we're supposed to talk about Cowboy Bebop, but it's just kind of
it's all interconnected, Jared.
Yes, but like Dragon Ball Z Kai, I think it was Dragon Ball Z Kai.
Yep.
Like where they like cut out all the filler episodes, or most of the filler episodes, or so they say. I don't know.
Yeah.
I still enjoy it in like short bursts. Like if I need a comfort show, I'll check it out sometimes. My favorite thing to watch though, like on YouTube, is like the abridged versions that are like basically parodies. I love those things so much. But I've tried to get into reading manga, but my issue is I found it at such an early age. So I found it around the time like when you go to the library and you can pull out comic books and you can read or whatever. So I started with The Adventures of Tintin first, and I really loved those, and I read all of those. And then I was like, okay, moving on. And then there was these mangas, but they were comic, in my mind, they're comic books, but they're all like, they're backwards. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I was reading them like you would read like a regular book, and I was like, this story is weird. Why is it going this? And then someone finally was like, you know that you read it the other way, right? And so like I was reading it like from the end forward every single time, and I was just so frustrated with it. I was just like, I will never read it ever again. It was purely just pride and embarrassment that I was just like, I'm never going to do it again. So whenever I hear people like, I read the manga, I'm always like, you're an Olympic reader, and I appreciate that.
By the way, something you said, Fred and Jared, I find really interesting, especially as I get older and older, is that like I had a really weird thing with my experience of geekdom where like I feel like right as things were getting a little bit more accepted was when I was just hitting a certain age. So I never quite was ever made fun of for my geekdom. I was made fun of for other things. Everyone always looked at me for knowing the difference between like New Genesis and Apocalypse, but that was a different kind of thing. But I think it's interesting about that with anime. I agree with you, Fred, where it's like the older I get, I understand this anime, Cowboy Bebop, much, much more on a deeper personal level that, frankly, I wasn't picking up as a teenager. But another reason why is because I was so attached to the characters that to me, it was a gateway drug for all the rest of anime, but also was kind of a personal thing. And I feel a lot of the people that I hung out with were kind of like that, where like the popular kids didn't know anime, but the freaks and the geeks knew anime. And I think what's really interesting is how anime has changed in that way, where like us older people remember, kind of like having like an Evil Dead, there's the dead lady under the basement. She keeps popping up from under the basement. Has anyone seen Evil Dead?
No,
Okay,
sorry.
So there's a famous image where it's like, she comes up from the basement, it's locked up, and she's all demotic. It's like, stuff like that. That's kind of what otaku culture sort of had a vibe for back in the day, even before the 90s invasion especially. But it's interesting that I feel like younger people don't have to deal with that as much, that it's much, much more mainstream. I mean, like, shoot, the freaking Demon Slayer film, the new one just came out, made like a bazillion dollars. Like, my local theater was packed when it came out. And so I just think it's an interesting thing about one of the reasons why I'm personally attached to this anime, and why I think maybe other otaku of my generation kind of have sort of our babies, is because there was an interesting culture of kind of like, we were the lower class, like below comic books, below D&D, or at least adjacent to D&D. And it's interesting that now D&D is super, super mainstream, and anime is more mainstream, where now comic books are kind of the lower class. But I find that really interesting. Sometimes I think about that, where it's like, there's a part of me that wants to go like, these kids these days, they don't understand. And then part of me goes, good, you don't understand. You don't understand what that pain was like, to feel sort of, the freak and the geek for being into Japanimation. I just find that very fascinating.
No. I am incredibly pissed off about the fact that they will never know the torture and pain of being bullied for liking whatever. I want you to know that suffering. It builds character and it makes you a decent human being. I knew what I didn't like.
Parenting coming out here.
I mean, there's an argument to that like, if you do face adversity, if you come out the other side, you will be better for it. I mean, I feel like I was almost going to say maybe I should take it upon myself to start picking on kids, but probably better not do that. I don't know.
One swing, just
like that's like, you watch anime, loser. But I feel like there should be some appreciation for what it was like and how it no longer is. It's just like, look, you kids these days with your Demon Slayer, you better not take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's also like you gain this level of pride from the fact that some of us were just like brave enough to be like, no, I like this, and this is cool, even if nobody else does. Like, it taught you to be an individual, as opposed to now it's like, it's the cool thing, so everybody likes it, so it's like, oh, you're not really much of an individual anymore. Most of us now, like, people in this group can say, well, we liked it when it wasn't cool, but, so, it's like we're the OGs of geekdom. And I mean, we're not even really the OGs, there are people that are way older than us that had their own things, but, like, nonetheless, like, for our generations, or I think I'm probably older than everybody here, but generally speaking, my generation, it was like, yeah, you had to be brave enough to say, I stand by this thing that I enjoy. And you had to fight for your passion. And I feel like you don't really have to do that as much anymore. And I guess I'm not really pissed off about it, but like, it's just, I find it fascinating that like nowadays it's the cool thing to like geek culture and geek things. It's like, but we got our asses kicked for that. I got my ass kicked so that you can love, anime openly.
That's
I'm
a
a pioneer of
thing to
geekdom.
say. That is a very poetic way to look at it. I appreciate your sacrifice.
Thank you.
That is another. I'm glad that you picked that up and added some more thoughts to it, Charles, because I was also going to say it makes me so sad to see some people being bullied and shamed for appreciating certain stories. Because imagine what the world is missing out on by trying to hide those stories, and imagine the gift that it could be if the stories that really made a difference in our hearts were actually celebrated and accepted. That kind of goes along with the agenda of, the stories that heal us and the stories that connect us are never going to be accepted right away. You're going to have to fight for that acceptance because there's too many people who want to keep up those dividing lines between people, which is really sad. I can kind of sympathize with the experience, but in a different way, because I was homeschooled and I was the oldest sibling. So, I mean, technically, if you think about it, I was the bully. But I was also in a very large homeschool, like, co-op community. So it was almost a school experience with the really close-knit community I grew up in, but everyone was very conservative. So I was very sheltered in the shows that I was allowed to watch. And I never had an interest in watching the shows that we were discouraged from watching. The result of that was that I grew up enjoying extremely niche media, and I always had the experience of being bullied because I had no idea who Taylor Swift was, or I had no idea who this other pop culture yes.
Sorry.
Sorry. So, yeah, it was like that wasn't bullied, but it was the kind of thing where I got so sick and tired of having to defend myself to people who kind of reacted with so much shock that I could even be a human and not know what this show or this celebrity was, that I started getting really good at faking the knowing what someone was talking about, just so that I didn't have to admit that I had no frame of reference for what they were into. And so now, being with this group, I kind of feel like I'm back in that state of I need to be educated on everything that I missed out on, and now I'm the not the cool one because I don't know anime. So it's funny. It's almost a reverse situation there.
Don't worry, we'll bully you. It's fine.
Okay, good. You're gonna make me a stronger person. Give me a try.
Yes.
Okay.
For the record, it's totally cool that you didn't know who Taylor Swift was. Nobody should know who Taylor Swift is. And
well, I can.
yeah, come at me, Swifties. Huh?
I can appreciate.
No, it's a fact.
Her now. That was a little. Yeah, you can.
Taylor Swift deserves an atomic elbow.
In a little bit.
One more thing about Taylor Swift, I'm gonna say like a really big thing, and you're not gonna like it.
I'm gonna say lots of things about Taylor Swift, like.
Back to Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah. On to safer ground.
This gets ugly.
At least once an episode, me and Charles have to throw down.
You're gonna get that Angels and Demons segment back.
Let's talk about the music. I want to talk about the music of Cowboy Bebop. I need to discuss it because I thoroughly enjoy the music of Cowboy Bebop. That funky jazz, I really, really like it. Especially the intro. I don't know what. I don't know what it is about it. I can't stop myself. Whenever it comes on, I will stop whatever I'm doing. And, back when it was on Amazon on Crunchyroll, it would the thing would pop up and it'd be like skip the intro, and I was like, never. And I was like,
can't do it, man. Can't do it.
But what did you guys think of the music?
I love it.
It's the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, very, very good soundtrack. Excellent instrumentation, and like it just fits. You know, like I'd be hard pressed to think of a better, more fitting soundtrack for anything just in general. Like, I mean, in like the anime realm, like Gunbuster's got a pretty good soundtrack, but like it doesn't fit in quite the same way that Cowboy Bebop does. I mean, even just like thinking on the first episode, like the bit when Spike is fighting Asimov while he's wearing the poncho, like the jazz song that plays when that happens, like that's an excellent song. Like I can envision the entire thing, the entire fight sequence when I listen to that song. Like it's to a point where I couldn't imagine there being anything else in the soundtrack in a scene like that. And it's like that for, the vast majority of the show, really.
I also think what's interesting too is most people will say, "Oh, it's the jazz music that's super excellent," and it totally is. I kind of liked jazz before, but after this it was like I started listening to jazz albums. That's a thing. But I think also some of the other music that isn't as jazzy is fascinating. So like in the 5th episode you have the song Rain, which starts with an organ and has lyrics, and then that leads into Greenberg, which I don't know if this is 100% true, but I've heard the lyrics of that song. It's just kind of nonsense words, which is fascinating. And then the movie has some really fun, like straight up pop, like almost pop songs that are really, really fun. So it's not just the jazz music, it's like the whole DNA, like you said, which is really fascinating.
It was the first time I had heard music like that in an anime. Because like when I had seen anime, most of the time it was like music that was like really cool score music that was like really either epic or little amusing type of music. But then, like, that and Samurai Champloo were the only ones that I was like, I really love the soundtracks of these. Especially Samurai Champloo, because I kind of love hip-hop. But, yeah, I just thought that was really, really, really interesting.
I was going to say, it's funny to me that both of you described the music as fitting, and you can't imagine anything else. Because for me, when I first turned it on, the music was actually a huge shock, because it was not what I was expecting for that show. It was a very different flavor than I went into the show expecting. But after I watched the first couple episodes, then it started being like, I really love it because this feels unique and because it's kind of setting itself up as its own thing. I'm curious, like, how many other shows there are that combine so many different elements in the seamless way to be such a unique story that as Cowboy Bebop.
Not many. I mean,
That's yeah.
like I would consider Cowboy Bebop to be like a rare 10 out of 10 masterpiece. Like in terms of combining all these disparate elements between like the various elements of genre and the soundtrack and all that, like I don't think there's anything quite on the level. I mean, Jared mentioned Samurai Champloo, which was broadly by like the same creative team, and it's similar in a way. It's rather than sci-fi neo-noir, it's more about samurai, I guess, but the soundtrack trends more towards hip-hop than jazz. But so that's like kind of in the same vein as Cowboy Bebop, but at least the last time I watched it, I didn't hold it to quite the same level as Cowboy Bebop. And without that, like, I don't know, I struggle to think of anything on really the same level in this type of way.
Yeah, it's very weird in a different way, and I find that interesting that most non-anime folk, they'll try anime, and I'm talking the critics here. I'm not talking like ordinary Joes. I'm talking like I write for Time magazine, which, by the way, side note, sometimes Time magazine has the stupidest opinions that are not actual opinions. They'll just say random facts. I'm like, that is objectively false, or you are on thin ice. So, sorry, that was my own personal vent there. But they'll usually say, "Oh, Cowboy Bebop is really popular amongst people because it's very like a Western cartoon. It's very much like Western stuff and not very anime-ish." And I'm like,
well, like it kind of is.
Kind of. Like, I guess it has like guns and spaceships that we can't understand, but I've always thought that this was a weird kind of thing. It's not as like, in a world where JoJo's Bizarre Adventure exists, it's definitely not the weirdest thing. It's not even the weirdest thing that I've seen as an anime person, just with anime alone. But I've always thought it was a very strange kind of construction as a whole. That, like, you can jump from comedy and martial arts, action, noir, detectives, bounty hunters, sci-fi, weirdness, kind of just hip-hopping along, which honestly, I think now that I think about it, Bebop was a huge influence to me creatively as a younger person, because I had never really seen, I mean, I guess Star Wars and The Matrix is the only two other comparisons off the top of my head where you can just throw stuff in the blender, shake it up, and you get something else. And also the idea, too, of like individual character episodes. Like, again, I know, say, Avatar had done that, but I never quite seen it where it's like, okay, here is a Spike episode, and here is a Faye episode, and these different styles of that material. So it's very fast. Thank you for that observation, Jalen.
Now that I think about the music again, like, and just anime and my experience with anime, I think about some shows where the music really stood out to me. Like, my favorite anime of all time is Phantom Requiem of the Phantom. And the music in that is fantastic to me. The Legend of the Galactic Heroes is also really good, which I think arguably has one of the best opening credits in anime. At least out of all the ones I've ever seen.
I'm pretty sure I know which one you're talking about, and I absolutely agree.
I love that. That's probably, I would say, you know what? My teenage self says that Phantom Requiem of the Phantom is my favorite anime. My adult realize what's happening in the world and radicalized and wanting revolution believes that Legend of the Galactic Heroes is probably my favorite anime, just because I think that one is fucking brilliant. And I love it so much. It's the only anime besides maybe Attack on Titan that I can see myself watching to like again and again and again and again. Like no breaks in between. Like it'll end and I can start it over and go again. But the music in those, to me, I thought were always probably gonna watch the Galactic the Galactic Heroes after we're done with this. Now that I've said that, but yeah, the music is I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of music in film and TV shows and things like that. It's one of I was just telling Raminso that if I couldn't be a director or a screenwriter, I would be a music supervisor, because there's so much tied into my creativity when it comes to music. Like, I will not start a project without creating a playlist first. I have to. Like, music is just such a big part of my thing. So whenever I'm listening to a show or I'm watching a show, I'm always paying attention to the musical choices of that show, and why did they choose that song, or why did they choose that score, and what is it trying to tell? Because a lot of times, even in music, it's like the music itself is telling a story. When you talk about the fight, and the music, it's like the music itself is telling a story, and that I think is so cool. Prime example of music telling stories without saying a word. Have any of you guys a fan of Sublime?
I've heard of them, and I've
It sounds
probably heard a
vaguely
couple
All of you
songs.
should listen to Sublime. Listen to Sublime. You need to. You'll be a little bit sad because their lead singer is dead.
Thank you for the warning.
But you're welcome.
I was
But
just
their
looking at
music.
the playlist, but now I'm second guessing because these are the same people who broke my heart, making me watch Land Before Time and All Dogs Go to Heaven and Oliver and Company, and not like you prepared me with the tragic story, and then you showed me the thing as if I was supposed to be happy about the thing, and I was like, no, I know the story behind this, and I'm sad now.
Sorry. Well, no, but you guys probably know the song Santeria. Everybody, I feel like most people, you'll know it as soon as you hear it. You've heard it on the radio.
It sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's like you'll just look it up when you get off. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But the song that I'm referring to that you should probably listen to it's a song called Pawn Shop. And the opening intro is like, I want to say it's like 2 to 3 minutes long. It feels like, when there's no words, but the instruments literally sound like they're communicating with each other the entire time. And it's like there are words, they're just not from people. It's kind of the coolest thing I've ever heard. But I say all of that just to say that like the musical choice in this is incredible. And I'm so curious as to why they chose what they chose and how they really broke that down.
If I'm correct, a few years ago for the live action remake they did on Netflix, Yoko Kanno, the composer, she did the soundtrack for that version too. And she was reflecting on it and on what she originally had done. And if I remember correctly, she had said basically that for her, one of the reasons she did the music the way she did was because in her experience as like a music student, had heard jazz was like elevator music, really like the slow, methodical, interesting stuff. And she's just like, I want jazz that explodes. I need it. And so when you have the creators of the show saying, let's do some weird stuff, because I think this was like technically the origin of the show was kind of like a toy line sort of a thing. Like it wasn't like that, but like there was a certain business thing with Bandai or something, and it devolved into what this is now. Evolved, whatever. That they allowed her to just go crazy with the music, of doing the music that she always wanted to hear from jazz. So I think that's a part of why it is the way she is, because basically they just said, go nuts. And she's like, I'm going to do what I've always wanted to do. I'm going to go crazy, and did that stuff. That's why it goes like, as the, immediate.
Sorry. So let's talk about characters, specifically the main character. Let's talk about Spike. What were your thoughts? First, Jaylon, what was your thoughts? Since you were the newest initiate to this show, what was your thoughts?
I immediately loved the main character. I loved the camaraderie there between all of the main characters, and I felt like there was a mystery behind, in the first episode there was a mystery behind who you should be rooting for, and I think that's really interesting when a show does that, because it makes you ask hard questions and see some good in characters, that instead of just classifying them in your brain as, that is the bad guy, you get to learn a little bit about them. And you have that mystery where it's almost like real life. You never know whether someone is going to bait and switch you into like, oh, actually, I am a bad guy in your story. So I appreciated that. And I really wanted to know, I forget the name of the character, but the woman who was with Asimov.
Ooh, I don't know if she had a name.
I feel she has a name, and I'm completely blanking on her name.
Well, whoever she was, I really wanted to see her show up in future episodes, and she didn't. Well, at least in the next 4. And I was really sad about that.
Jeez.
Yeah, she bought the farm, unfortunately.
Yeah.
It's kind of, a lot of Cowboy Bebop is kind of inherently tragic, I guess. And Spike is largely the epicenter of that. he's not the only one. There's plenty of tragedy to go around, but unlike Spike, the way he presents himself initially, once you know more, it makes sense. But, the initial appearance of being, carefree, bending like a reed, flowing like water and all that, like that's not exactly the truth of the matter, I guess, is perhaps the best way to put it.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting in that with the music, that's something I find really fascinating about the show is that it tricks you, right? Because it's like, I think it's time to blow the scene. Yeah, let's go. But then episodes start and it's like these sad little things. Like the very setting, I've heard someone call like a human diaspora, a fleeing Earth, and they're all kind of scattered. And there's kind of just this sort of melancholic tone to everything. But then there'll be like jazz music, or this really cool thing or this silly thing. And it's true. It's not untrue, but there is this melancholy that goes around, and without getting into real big spoiler territory, as well as without completely cutting up on my heart like it's freaking heart surgery here, there is this pain of the characters not being able to let things go and being haunted by things that they can't get resolved. So it just sits there in their head again and again. And part of why, at least for kind of my interpretation, that Spike and Jet are the way they are is because they're like, well, what are you gonna do? And what's interesting is as the story starts to go on, life forces them, as well as Faye and Ed, to confront what they're trying to just push in the background, which is one of the most brilliant metaphors for being an adult in an interesting way. I've seen it in other places too, but there's something about this that really sticks in my head, because I think it just really, really hits. I mean, again, without spoiling anything, there will come, if you finish the show, there will come a time where you will never be able to look at, is it boiled eggs, I think? Like cooked eggs that you can just eat the same way again. And that's not one of those hee hee ha ha things. It's just something that sits in my head that ties into what we're saying.
Yeah. VHS tapes too.
VHS tapes too, yeah.
Well, a lot of things really that, you can't really look at the same.
Like cigarettes.
Cigarettes, yeah.
I have asthma, so I can't smoke. I never really wanted to smoke. And there were a couple of teens in high school who smoked. I was like, you sound awful. You sound miserable. So I never was into smoking, whatever, fine. But man, if I was ever going to become a smoker, it's because of Spike. It's modeling myself after my anime brother here, but I never did. I don't know how this man doesn't have lung cancer. Has always been my running background joke.
I mean, whether or not he has lung cancer, that kind of ties into, even the sort of thematic question of the whole show is kind of a spoiler in a sense. Charles, I think you of all people would know what I mean by that. But yeah, lots of really heavy stuff that, the first episode does hint at it. There's a fair bit of violence, tragedy, and death. But the first episode kind of goes a length to maybe not hide it, but disguise the true depths of things, especially, stuff we learn in later episodes.
So in the episodes I saw, I really liked it because I liked the main character. I like Spike, but I liked them all. But I like the general tone of the show because I'm really, really, really into dark stuff. I'm into the melancholy of life. And from what I gathered from Cowboy Bebop, it's in a lot of ways. It has its humor, it has its but it is very melancholic in a lot of ways. As a fan of grim dark fantasy, I'm currently reading, which isn't really grim dark fantasy, but it's crime. But I'm reading Power of the Dog right now, which is also just incredibly sad.
Oh man, I thought you said you were going to say you were reading Berserk, and I'm like, Jared, I told you not to.
No.
That's another rabbit hole.
So Berserk, I started Berserk, and I liked it. It's just
Berserk is brutal, just absolutely.
But
brutal.
I like that.
I totally told Jalen, I'm like, don't read it, don't look at it, don't open it up, don't touch it. Never.
I like being emotionally destroyed by my content. I need that in my life. the real world destroys me enough, and then I need to find other fantasy places, fictional worlds that will do the same to me, because I'm a masochist, and this is what you deserve, and I just go and I read and watch things that break my heart. So I will literally go online and look for, like, give me an anime that will make me cry like a child.
All right.
And
You want a little recommendation?
please.
All right. Gunbuster from Studio Gainax in like 1989. 6-episode OVA series. Absolutely brutal.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Kill me.
It's
I'm sorry, Power of the Dog.
Yes, Power of the Dog. So I'm reading Power of the Dog by Don Winslow, who is one of my favorite authors. And in this book, this is more about like Mexican cartels and the DEA, but it's just like really, really fucked up shit that's going on. And it's like this guy who at the beginning of the book kind of starts off as like this hopeful guy who just got out of the CIA and is working for the DEA now, and he's like, I'm going to make a difference and I'm going to do good things. And it's like, as you slowly watch, is like he's just like breaking, because he's just like, the world is a really fucked up place. And I love watching shows. I just finished watching Andor. That's another one where it's just like, I like it. I like these dark, twisted things, especially when they're in space, because it's like, even when we get off of this planet and we get as far away from the world, human beings are still going to be human beings, and they're still going to do human being shit. And that, as much as I love and hate human beings with equal measure, because of how incredibly curious and beautiful and compassionate we can be, but also how cruel and selfish and greedy we can be. And I love both sides of those things, because I think that they show us something to aspire to not be. And it also shows us the light in ourselves, I think. I feel seen by dark, melancholic things. I don't know why. I feel seen by it.
That's I was gonna jump off of that. That's kind of what I was going to say, because I think it was a podcast episode we just had. I was talking about this. Like, there's something in me since I was a teenager that it shifted from, I love watching movies because they are fun, and I love reading books because they let me imagine great things, to the things that I started calling beautiful were words or stories or images that ripped my heart out. And I started realizing, like, you're a really morbid person for calling these things beautiful. Like, this is the kind of art you love. You love reading poems that just open up a scar in your heart that you've tried so hard to hide. But I think that's exactly what it is we feel seen and validated by a story that doesn't flinch away from the darkness that we experience every day, but we're asked to keep walking through life as if it doesn't break our heart. And so having a story that can center that for us in, like, give us a space where it can be unpacked, where it's acknowledged this world is a really dark place, humanity is really dark, and also here's a little thing of beauty, because this is also true. This darkness is true, and we're validating it for you, that this is a true experience that you've had, even if no one else has validated it for you. But also, this thing is true. Also, this little piece of beauty in the midst of that darkness is true. So I think that's why stories like this are so special, and we relate to it so much, because it speaks to that deep need for validation in all of us to be seen in our human experience in all of its darkness. So that's why I would say this show has, like, really sticks in your heart and kind of hits at something deeper than just the aesthetic is amazing.
I agree with that. I think that's exactly what I think, because I think it's interesting that all of us find these different things. Like, Charles, you were talking about, at a really low point in your life, you found the show, and it's like, and it helped you through that moment. I think I've had similar feelings and similar experiences. It's like one of those things where we find it beautiful, because it's like, you can see you and your inside of you may be a little bit broken by some things, and a lot of times the society around you spends so much time telling you that the broken parts of yourself are ugly and not acceptable. And then in the moments where you see something that's a little bit broken, or a character that's a little bit broken, and you see the beauty in that character, it's almost like somewhere the universe is telling you that you can be broken and still be beautiful. Things inside of you can be broken and you can still be special. And I think that's why people are drawn to these kinds of things, or at least I know that's why I'm drawn to a lot of these things. It's like, I was broken since I was a teenager, and majority of my time, probably longer even before that, like, and most of my life, it was just being told that there's something wrong with you. You're not good. That's bad. Go fix that thing about you. And then you see these characters that are not fixed, and even though some of them have like sad downfalls and tragic endings, but you still find the beauty in them. And in essence, you're just looking for the beauty in yourself. In those moments. In this particular show, Spike has this, to me, in the episodes I've seen, he has this very cavalier attitude about a lot of things, and I imagine it's a mask for deeper issues that will be revealed later on. But he has this cavalier attitude in the face of truly sad and sometimes tragic things. And I wish I had that ability. I wish that I could be cavalier when something really fucked up happens. When you look at the news or you look at TikTok and you see what's happening in our country right now, it's like, oh, I wish I could be cavalier about everything and just be like, it's all cool, like whatever, like what are you gonna do? Like, I'm gonna eat some fucking ramen, it doesn't matter. And just kind of like, I wish you could do that. And so I admire that in the character a little bit. I have some admiration for that.
I'm curious, Fred, what is your favorite character from Cowboy Bebop and why?
Ooh. My favorite character... See, I feel like I could pull out like a deep cut here, but, half the panel hasn't gotten that far yet. I think I will say Spike. Well, no, you know what? I think I'm going to pick Jet. I mean, really, I like the whole crew of the Bebop. There are definitely things to like and appreciate about any of the characters, but I think the thing I appreciate about Jet the most is that despite the chaos of the galaxy, with all the crazy things going on, all the bounty hunting, all the interactions with various triads and criminal organizations, Jet essentially strives to create a little bubble of stability, for better or for worse. The Bebop, like, life isn't great on the Bebop, With like 6 episodes in, there have probably already been a couple instances where everybody's really hungry and there isn't much food to eat. I don't know if Faye has stolen the dog food yet by episode 6.
I can't remember either.
I don't.
There's just this one bit where, like, there's like a can of dog food and like someone gave it to Ian and Faye's like, nope, not for you. People are more important. It's just like, well, all right, if you want to eat dog food. Despite the unfortunate state that they find themselves in a lot of the time, Jet works really harder than anyone to try and create a sense of stability and order where otherwise there wouldn't be any.
Mm-hmm. I saw that even in the first few episodes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he calls it beef and bell peppers, but,
yeah.
They're broke.
Yep. But there's no beef.
You can't really call it beef and bell peppers with no beef, but you actually can when you're broke.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a nobility to Jet that as I get older, I really appreciate and respect. And I think it's interesting, something you just said kind of clicked in my brain about the stability is that the characters by tail's end make important choices because of their experiences together. And it's because of the ship. It's because of the Bebop and what Jet has created. So in a fascinating way, I never really thought about this before because this is the anime that keeps on giving, and also the people like you who will make these observations that expand my brain more and more, is that Jet's you could almost the catalyst to the whole enchilada, or at least for their arcs, the propulsion of them slowly but surely changing, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
But I couldn't really pick a character, but I will just say in brief that like Faye is also someone that I've really become to really understand more and more also as I get older, and she's just also a ton of fun and goofy sometimes.
Question for you guys then. Do you guys think that Cowboy Bebop is timeless?
Yeah, without a doubt.
I mean, it's been 20 plus years now, so that's got to count for something.
I think the only reason it wouldn't be timeless, and this is kind of touching on what we were talking about before we started recording, if we get to 2071 and it's so far removed from the reality there that people are just like, this is a joke, because their imagination, they don't have that gift of imagination anymore because the time that was then is now. So I think that something can be timeless if it continuously sparks your imagination, but at the point where this show becomes like it was a prediction that came to pass as untrue, I feel like people will stop investing in it and be willing to see the timeless themes and characters that are behind the setting.
And honestly, I think a lot of stuff that really does come from the heart ends up being timeless. I think aesthetics age but because that's just nature. But like, I just had the opportunity to finally see Spider-Man 2 in the theater, and I've seen this movie a million times, but I never got to see it in the
Nice.
theater when it came out, etc. And I loved it. But what was amazing, I was thinking about is how much, 21 years later, the film still hits me and it still has an impact. And like, there are aesthetical elements of that are not, that are dated. For example, no one has smartphones or any of that. New York doesn't exist like that anymore. But what the characters go through is still timeless. It's still applicable to the human heart now. So I think with Bebop, they don't really know what DVDs are. So to them, it's just VHS and beta, because VHS was probably what the first episodes were put on, at least in the States. So aesthetically, things might change. Tying to that, Spider-Man 1, that thing feels like a movie from 2002 aesthetically. But emotionally, I think, yeah, as long as you're talking about the human heart, or it comes from the heart, I think stuff like this does stand the test of time, because it's not just talking to a specific heart of the present, but a heart that keeps going, is my feel.
Now, I think even aesthetically, Cowboy Bebop could stand the test of time, because one of the things that stuck with me about it is this sense of degradation. Because they have all this advanced technology, but even then, for how advanced it is, it's all, ramshackle, and like things are like patched over with patches upon patches upon patches, duct tape and string holding everything together. And I feel like there's always a sense, just from like my small understanding of history, that everyone always thinks everything is on the verge of collapse.
Mm-hmm.
And in a sense, like, some people are bound to be right eventually, but like,
yeah.
like I turn the light switch on and the lights come on, so as far as I'm concerned, we're not there yet. And speaking of timelessness and things that might counteract that, like the anime I just recommended, Gunbuster, I forget when it takes place in the show. I want to say 2020, and it was made in 1989. And one of the things that struck me when I was recently rewatching it was that one of the side characters was from the Soviet Union.
Oh.
And, it was still around in 1989, and it collapsed shortly thereafter. Like, I don't know what you would call it. Maybe not an anachronism, but it's like it's something that no longer makes sense now. But in my mind, it doesn't necessarily detract from it. And I feel like that's the same thing with Cowboy Bebop. Like, if you can ignore that it says 2071, like, if you can ignore just that one little bit, I feel like everything else still holds up.
Also, on that note, something that I found fascinating when I first saw the show, and still is fascinating, still a huge creative inspiration for me, is that there are benches and trash cans in this show. I know that sounds weird, but it's like, I hadn't seen trash cans in a space opera before. And there was a whole thing with the creators talking about that. They're like, let's make trash cans. And I was like, that's amazing. And it's interesting because this traditions actually kind of carry on with the, speaking of Andor, in the second season. The first season has this too, but the second season specifically, there's a moment of Cassian goes to a convenience store. And as a long time Star Wars fan, I was flipping out. I was like, this is amazing. There's a convenience store in Star Wars that's just so brilliant. It makes it feel more alive than ever. So I credit, from my imagination, Bebop for introducing me to that kind of sense of there is more to that realism, and that, which I think also even got extended to the comic book series Saga, which is also a space opera. That one's more of a Star Wars-y space opera than this more grounded cowboy stuff. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing that I think extends that sense of it lasting. Because Saga and Cowboy Bebop both have toilets that people use. There's, I don't know if it was in the scene, but there's a whole shot that still cracks me up to this day of Spike. He's hungover and he's sitting on the toilet on the phone on his little speaker. And that will always be a thing.
Fair. I am also curious. This was something that I thought about when you guys mentioned the movie. Do you feel like, I'm asking Charles and Fred because you've seen I'm assuming that you've both seen the movie and the full show. Do you feel like the movie did something in its storytelling that the show didn't, or do you feel like the episodes of the show were able to explore something that the movie couldn't because of its episodic storytelling?
Well, I'll just go and say that I haven't seen the movie.
Okay.
But what I have heard on just, various forums, online places, is that people like to assume that the chronology is such that the film takes place after the series. And they do that for their own personal reasons. I can understand why people would do that, but I disagree. If I think Charles is picking up on what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do agree with that for a few reasons. But yeah, for me, the movie, it's interesting because I love the movie. The movie's the official first thing I ever saw of it. It's fun, it's cool, it's gorgeous. I mean, not to be like that old man yells at cloud, but there was just a trailer for a new anime film that's coming out that's, I can't remember what the studio is, and it was like something about androids and action stuff. But I was like, yes, because I miss the action anime, especially in film. I feel like there used to be a lot, and then Makoto Shinkai made Your Name, and everyone's like, let's make Your Name again and again and again and again. And I feel we're finally moving away from that. And so this movie is kind of a part of that. Like, especially when I was a teenager, anime films fascinated me because I loved animation, and I was like, this is so different from anything. Why doesn't this exist everywhere all the time as another option? And it's really, really neat. And I think the one thing that the movie does that maybe the show can't quite do is that it kind of is able to make it not just a Spike story, but an everyone story. So you can stop, says something about Jet, says something about Spike, it says something about a little bit of everyone. But as much as I love it, and I haven't seen it in a little bit of the tick, I'd have to rewatch it, but it feels more like an extended episode, which is cool because it's Cowboy Bebop, it's awesome. But I feel in that sense, it kind of is just that versus the show, honestly, in a sense, especially some later stuff can be a little weirder and wackier, in a sense. So I think the one thing that basically the movie can do that the show couldn't, can't, whatever, is being more exploratory about the world and how it feels. There's this wonderful montage of Spike just wandering around the city. You just get to see people. I love seeing just about people, a little bit more, but it not necessarily anything super, super crazy different. So it's almost like one of the Naruto filler movies or something like that, but more high end.
Okay.
So I'll ask one last question, and then we'll wrap things up. The last question I have for you guys: if you could reimagine one piece of Cowboy Bebop for today, what would it be and why?
It's hard to ask me because I've only seen the first 4 to 5 episodes.
And I'll ask the veterans.
Ooh. So that's a hard question because I really wouldn't change anything, Like, I was sort of aware that a question like this would be coming, and before I rewatched the first episode, I was like, I think I know what I would change, and then I watched it, and then it's like, no, that thing was entirely justified. Spike picking the guy's pocket after he strangled him.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that it was explicitly showing him picking the pocket right then and there. It's I figured, oh, you could add a little shot of that, but if I could reimagine something for today, I feel like I would have to mess around with probably one of the later episodes, maybe something more space centric, just now that we know more about astronomy and how stuff works, maybe include something like that. But I'm really hard pressed to mess around with anything in Cowboy Bebop just because so much of it is so excellent that I feel like I'd be doing it a disservice to change anything.
Yeah, I must admit, I can put on my creative hat and say something like that, but I can also just put on my personal hat. It's one of those few things I'm I don't really want to touch it. I wouldn't really want to do that. I put it this way, I'm against the whole let's turn animation to live action because live action is more legitimate as a thing in general. But even besides that, dude, I did not pity the showrunners of the Netflix show at all because I'm good luck. I wouldn't want that job. Even as a super duper Uber fan.
Yeah, I wouldn't take that job at gunpoint.
Yeah, that's a really good description. But I guess if I had to say something, I guess I don't know. I guess maybe having just maybe like one more scene of vicious, maybe like just one little intrigue thing, or maybe a museum. Maybe there's like a conversation about a case that Jet has, and they're like a museum that maybe details more of how humanity left Earth for Mars and like another element of it. But even then, like my heart is like, no, you're touching it already. So that's what comes to mind. What a terrible question, Jared. Terrible question to ask me. Could
You
you?
know me, I gotta fuck shit up. So no, but that's I accept that. I mean, if you guys want to be boring, it's fine. I'm just kidding. No, but no,
Well,
that's
now you
fine.
have to answer, Jared.
I have no answer. I actually have no answer because I literally have only seen 6 episodes, and nothing in the 6 episodes that I saw would I say I would change about them, because I feel like I didn't get enough of the story yet to be like everything that I would be like, oh, well, maybe I would tinker with that. I feel like no, there's probably a good reason for that, and if I changed to that, then it would fuck up everything else. So I just probably won't. So it's one of those things. It's like, I don't know. It's like, I can't even describe it. It's like taking a sample of like a huge plate and then being like, this whole plate's gonna suck, based on just one little thing that I ate over in the corner. So that would be what I would say. But anyway, that is my thoughts. That is our thoughts on Cowboy Bebop. Fred, first of all, thank you so much for joining us and having a conversation. This was a fantastic conversation. I had a lot of fun in this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Fred, do you have anything of yours to plug here for our?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, The Eccentric Detective Yamamoto, the books I write.
Nice.
Yeah, 4 books out now. Another one coming in December.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That is very, very cool.
We'll put a link in the description for people to go learn more.
All right. Excellent. Thank you.
Awesome.
You Jared.
But yeah, so thank you for listening, guys. Next week we will be talking about the movie that got me in love with films, and that would be Hook. We will also have my filmmaking mentor on the show, who I've been trying to get on the show forever. And finally, now that he's under the same roof, I can just be like, get over here. So that's what we'll be doing. But overall, guys, thanks for listening. I did have a cool little sign off that I was going to say with an engagement type question, but I don't feel well and I don't want to ask it. So I'm not gonna. But
I have an idea. What
Sure.
show met you where you were at your darkest time and saved you?
Good question.
Leave it in the comments.
Leave it in the comments. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Stories. I am 1/3 of your host. I'm Jared.
I'm another third. I'm Jaylon.
And I'm Charles.
And we will see you guys later. And this is where the Cowboy Bebop music plays. And it's like, yeah, so that's how it's playing us off right now. All right, guys. Later.